like to call this meeting of the Bellingham Transportation Benefit District to order. Kathy Lehman, who normally would chair, is unable to make it today, so I will be filling in for Kathy. See, we've got a couple different items before us. The first looks like the WTA agreement. And who's taking this?
Thank you, Terry. Brian Henshaw, Finance Department. I'll do the first two agenda items. They should be relatively quick. They're both procedural in nature. We included the WTA renewal and modification of the interlocal agreement between the Transportation Benefit District and WTA. And I just wanted to point out to you, Section 2.3 has been added. It's basically about the indemnity clause of the original contract, and it just helps define and clarify some of the indemnity issues between the WTA and the city.
Okay. Committee, any questions?
Okay. And then I would ask that you vote to approve the modification and then authorize the chair of the TBD to enter into and renew the contract for WTA.
Okay. Mooney? Mo? Jack?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second before us. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Great, thank you.
And the next is the proposed 2015 TBD meeting schedule.
Correct. So the revised Code of Washington requires that all public agencies post their upcoming meetings for next year, and you as council will act this afternoon to set your schedule, and so we were just trying to coordinate the meetings for next year between the TBD and the council. So what staff is proposing that in February, July, and October, we would schedule TBD meetings at noon on the second meeting of the month that council meets on the same day that you guys meet on those months. And if that's to your approval, we would also entertain a motion to that.
Michael?
Are we under statutory requirements to meet quarterly or anything like that?
I don't believe in the TBD that there is that requirement. Some of the public agencies, we do have that requirement. This would be the minimum number of published meetings, and if we need additional ones, we will schedule those and post those, but we're at least putting these on the calendar currently.
I would move that the TBD board adopt the proposed TBD meeting schedule for 2015.
Second.
Okay, second. One clarification. What were the months again that you...
I identified February, July, and October.
Okay. Okay. Oh, okay.
Joe, if something comes up, we can convene in it.
Correct.
Okay, we got a motion and second before us. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, please answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes 6-0 with Kathy Lehman excused. Michael.
Yeah, just a point of order. I noticed we have 2 meeting minutes to approve, and it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, no, we're going to get to that.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. The third item on here is the TBD work plan.
Thank you, Ted Carlson, Public Works. I will be handling this agenda item along with Chris Como. At your previous board meeting, the board provided direction on the transit improvements at Bellisville Parkway, so we addressed that issue already, and that money to come out of the transit portion of the TBD, but we did not have time to go through the non-motorized, so the bike and ped project. So we have received some questions. Michael submitted some questions which we responded to, and Chris is here today and can run through the projects. Just kind of do a brief overview that might make the most sense, and otherwise if the board has questions, we'd be happy to answer them. I think just some general themes is this will be the first time we'll truly be adopting a 2-year work plan. We've done a little bit of that in the past and approved projects for design in 1 year and construction in the 2nd year. But this really is a 2-year plan to go along with the city's adoption of a biennial budget. And the other real theme out of this is really trying to be opportunistic and piece several projects together. This will be the first time we've had adopted bike and ped plans to work from. So we've got some prioritized projects that have been through the public process, and we have our regular transportation projects that you approved through the 6-year TIP. And there's really been an effort made to take projects that have been identified in the two mode-specific plans, maybe not all of the top-tier projects, but projects that, when strung together and done in conjunction, create links, important links. And so you'll see some projects that may not have been Tier 1 projects, may have been down the prioritization scale a little bit, but are adjacent to Tier 1 projects, or are around other capital projects like the Alabama corridor, for instance. So that really was the theme, to try to leverage the money, also looking at grant money and leveraging that. But with that, maybe Chris can go through some of the projects, not all of them, but highlight some of the main themes and main projects, and then we can answer questions that the board may have. So if Terry, if that's okay.
No, that sounds fine. Is that okay with the committee? Chris, take it away.
Good afternoon, Council. Chris Como, Transportation Planner with Public Works. I don't know if we want to dim the lights. Is this?
Oh, I got it.
Yeah. So, like Ted said, I'm just going to run through kind of high level some of these and try to provide some of the rationale for the order in which these show up. I want to say right off the bat that the 2014 section of the table was really put in there as a reference point and kind of to show that we're already doing a lot of things, both from a pedestrian and bicycle standpoint, in terms of implementing these plans. We've been doing that for many years, but I really wanted to just highlight both, the PED plan and the bike plan, things that we're already doing. There's also some projects in 2014 that got delayed because we didn't have enough staff capacity. Now we do, and those projects will be constructed in 2015. And the ones that got delayed are here. Eliza, I'm going to use the cursor up here on the screen. Eliza, and then the Ohio Street projects. Eliza is moving forward. We're having our design kickoff meetings and things like that. That's the section between Westerly and Kellogg. It's the adding a sidewalk and bike lane to the west side of the street. We'll be working with the neighborhood here shortly, but we hope to get moving on that pretty quickly. The Ohio Street project, we're also doing work with that. Of course, Ohio Street is proposed to have bike lanes on it. In order to do that, parking would have to be removed from one side of the street. Anytime we have to do something like that, we have to go out and spend some time working on some plans. How would we do that? And this one had been funded by the TBD board, I think 2 years ago, and we were not able to get to it last year. We've now done a parking study, and we're going out and meeting with all of the business owners on Ohio Street right now, and we're simply asking about what their needs are, what some concerns might be, telling them what we're attempting to do, that we don't yet have a recommendation, but that's what all this is leading to. We'll have a open house on December 16th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Bellingham High School. So we've already met with several business owners. We'll invite the public in, and at that point we'll display some options, and ultimately that'll lead to a recommendation to the Transportation Commission in January, and then it'll come to you, I hope, in early February for a decision on what we do on Ohio. So that's really why these projects were shown, just the 2014 portion, to show you that they're going to be moving into 2015. We'll get into those projects now. The idea with the 2015 projects was to try to accomplish as much as we possibly could from both a pedestrian master plan standpoint and a bicycle master plan standpoint. And that's why you see the green P's and the blue B's in here. What we're trying to show you is we're trying to hit as many of these things as we possibly can in conjunction with other capital work we have going on around the city, trying to take advantage of efficiencies from a construction standpoint and hopefully a cost-saving standpoint. And as you may recall, with all of the discussion around our Alabama Street project, which will be happening in 2015, it really lent itself well to tackling a whole bunch of projects, whether they're Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. It just made sense to go in and do all of these all at once. It really does allow us to save money on these projects. But like anything, plans can change. And even since I put this table together, we took it to the Transportation Commission in mid-October, and they've given you a resolution recommending their approval. But we've now since learned that on Texas, the Bike Boulevard, there's actually stormwater work scheduled for 2016, and it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for us to go and rip up the street after we've put a bicycle boulevard on Texas. And so for a certain portion of Texas, we need to wait until 2016. However, it allows us to go put one of the traffic calming features at the intersection of Texas and Nevada. So we'll still have a more Texas-Nevada connection that will still take people down to Kentucky and under I-5. It's still a great connection. It's just that we won't be able to make the piece from Nevada over to Verona until 2016. Once the stormwater work is done, all sealed up, we'll go ahead and establish the bike boulevard on that section. Doesn't mean the street's not usable, it simply won't be marked that way. The other thing is that on Undyne Street, there's also stormwater work. Well, we had said, gosh, we would like to go put a sidewalk out on Undyne Street and St. Paul Street, again, in conjunction with our Alabama safety improvements. Well, because of that, we think it makes more sense to delay these projects until 2016 in conjunction with the stormwater work so that we can actually take advantage of that situation and maybe do the stormwater work and maybe even realize some more cost savings by getting it all done and sized correctly to accept impervious from a sidewalk. So our recommendation is a slight alteration of what you've seen in this table, but it also allows us to maybe bump another one from 2016 up to 2015. I'll talk about that in just a second. Really, the point I'd like to make about this section of the table, and that's why the columns were arranged this way, we're tackling a whole bunch of projects from our bicycle and pedestrian master plans. We're taking advantage of removing the barrier of Alabama Street by putting in all of these crossings and connections. We're making crossings of I-5, which is something that the Transportation Commission emphasized when they recommended approval of the bicycle master plan, and so we're really gaining a lot of value here with these. There's a couple very important things down here in purple that I'd like to mention, and that is in the 6-year TIP, we had recommended a 10% reserve being set aside so that we would have a fund for local matches towards grants. And a perfect example of this is the sidewalk money we got from TIB to do the Lincoln Street sidewalks. Well, we were able to use $15,000 of local funds and leverage that for $270,000 of state grant money, along with $50,000 from the university and $15,000 from our partners at WTA. So altogether, we're putting in $80,000 of local money, and we got $270,000 from the state. So the city's cost for this sidewalk, $15,000. This pool of money would be used specifically for that purpose. We would only use it for the kinds of projects that we're making bicycle and pedestrian improvements for. Another example would be U Street. We just got a grant on Friday to build the other side of U Street between Alabama and Texas. Well, another opportunity to draw from a pool like this and say the local match should come from this. It's in the pedestrian master plan. Let's go do this. Got a grant from the state for the rest of it, making our money go farther. So this allows us to have something to show those state agencies, boom, here we go. We've got the funding right here. It's been approved. We're ready to go. We've also got in our bicycle master plan a series of projects that we were not able to make recommendations for at this point. They're called further study needed links. They're very important links in the overall bicycle network, but we don't know yet what to do. And so we need to spend more time basically doing an engineering study. That would constitute the preliminary engineering or design phase of a capital project ultimately. So what we would like to do, and what the Transportation Commission has agreed with us in terms of recommending approval, is to set aside 2.5%, $40,000 a year roughly, to use to actually conduct these studies. So we can go say, well, we don't know yet what this is supposed to be. We're going to put some time in it. We're going to look at all these different issues, and then we're going to come up with a recommendation. And ultimately, that would serve as the PE design portion of a project. We would then go seek construction funds after that. We may be right here back in front of you to ask for that money for construction. We don't even know yet what the costs would be because we haven't made the recommendation. So that's what the 2.5% reserve would be for. There's about 20 further study needed projects in the bicycle master plan. The only way for us to get to a recommendation is to conduct the studies. And then I've listed some of those. As an example, at the Transportation Commission meeting in October, the intersection of Sussex and Barkley was brought up. It is listed for further study in both the pedestrian and bicycle master plans as a long-term, but the Transportation Commission recommended moving it up, and that's what this is listed here for. Holly Street, we're working with the planning department right now on downtown issues and what we might be able to do on Holly for all sorts of things. It's a Tier 1 bicycle project, further study needed. So this money would be used for something along those lines. So I'm going to move into 2016 now, unless there's some questions on 2015. And this is what the 2016,
Michael, you had a question?
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, this has to do with the 10% reserve. I didn't understand it at first. I think it's a pretty clever idea, though. I like it a lot. Do those studies plan to be done in-house or through a consultant? The reason I ask is sometimes we have a bottleneck with the amount of in-house staff, and so one way around that to move these projects forward is to increase our capacity. Do you have any plans yet as to who might be doing that for the study work?
I think it'll probably be a combination of in-house and using outside consultants. I mean, some of the work we can do in terms of traffic counts and some of the preliminary analysis, but we may need to bring in a transportation engineer or traffic consultant to come in and help us. So it would probably be a combination of the two.
That's correct, and actually as an example on Holly Street, that's exactly what we're doing. It's city staff working with consultants to try to figure out what we can do on Holly Street.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to 2016. It's pretty much the same setup in terms of you got a bunch of projects listed and then again the 10% reserve and 2.5% reserves. I will mention that the Alderwood Avenue and Maplewood projects are very key because we've basically made a grant application for about a half-mile of sidewalk on the east side of West Maplewood. In the 6-year TIP, we've essentially shown resurfacing funds for that. It will get bike lanes. When we do the resurfacing, we'll do rechannelization. It'll get bike lanes. We have applied to the state for a grant about $900,000 to put a half-mile of sidewalk on the east side of West Maplewood. Very hopeful we'll get that funding, but we won't know till the end of the year if we've even made a list. But key to this is showing them that in addition to that, we can actually build the section of sidewalk on Alderwood using TBD funds, $350,000, to basically surround the entire middle school site with sidewalks and basically have an entire super block connected by sidewalks so kids can walk to the middle school. That's also adopted in the 6-year TIP. Pacific Street and Orleans Streets are things that there's recommendations for bicycle lanes and bicycle boulevards. One of the tricks to these, though, is there may be some intersections that we need to take some time to look at. For instance, on Orleans Street, we might want to do some intersection improvements, but we have to decide again if we're going to put bike lanes on Orleans, does it require removing parking? If so, which side? And those decisions have yet to be made. So. Project 32, 33, and 34, Mill and 24th intersection is something that we've made a recommendation for because of the reconstruction of the Happy Valley Elementary School. They're proposed to open in the fall of 2016, and this would be perfect timing to do this intersection improvement and put in crosswalks and things here to support the school. 24th Street is listed as a bicycle boulevard, and we would be able to put this in at that same time, connecting 24th Street all the way to 12th Street in Fairhaven. Mill Avenue, Mill is going from 24th to 12th Street in Fairhaven. 24th Street would be from Old Fairhaven Parkway all the way up past the school and then connecting into our 25th Street improvements that we just completed. So the school would be very well connected for both bicycle and pedestrian purposes. The intersection of Mill and 12th is in Fairhaven, and it's a prominent intersection. It's right where the Asian Bistro is, and on the other side, on the east side of the street, there's 2 vacant lots, or an old gas station and a vacant lot, and redevelopment is proposed right there. And so what we're saying here is we could take advantage of the fact that there's redevelopment happening with 2 mixed-use buildings and improve the intersection, make it much safer, but it might offer some opportunities for placemaking as well. And so we've got some ideas. They're nothing more than concepts at this point. But in relation to what we talked about with Undine and St. Paul and Texas earlier, because those may need to be delayed for stormwater work, this is the project that we might be able to elevate to 2015 and try to work with the timing of the development and actually take advantage again of some cost savings working on a public-private partnership. The developers would be required to do their street frontage improvements, which includes the sidewalk sections. So we wouldn't necessarily take on this entire cost. There would be some cost savings there from the developer side. So timing makes a lot of sense. It would be really nice if we could try to do this and work together with our private development partners. You'll also notice that down here at the bottom, the Sussex, Barclay, Hawley, and Lakeway have kind of moved into more of a construction phase. And of course, there's no cost associated with that, but it presumes that we've actually been able to do some studies to get to a recommendation. Of course, we'd be back here in front of you to explain what those would be.
Okay, any questions from committee? Michael?
I remember, I don't know, months ago when we were talking about the TBD, I said what I think the TBD really needed was a tip-like document that looks forward and plans our capital projects. This is differently formatted, but it accomplishes the purpose. I really like having these projects laid out in a sequence, even if we don't stick to the sequence. It's really, I really appreciate that look forward, and at a certain point, the look forward will go to the end of the TBD. In a couple of years, we'll be mapping out to the end of the TBD, and that'll be nice to see.
Yeah, thank you. Chris put a lot of work into this, and I think we're moving in the right direction, and we would like the same thing, to be able to look out even a few years further, like we do with the 6-year tip, and to the end of to the term of the TBD, and as we start talking about what the future means when that funding goes away.
Okay. Yes.
I have a particular question about the Mill and 24th Street intersection. I think there's a lot of ditches around there, if I recall correctly, on 24th. Is there any stormwater projects contemplated to replace those ditches that might interact with what goes on in the area?
I think
No, Happy Valley actually likes their ditches, or
Okay.
bioswales, as we like to refer to them.
Okay,
Yep.
The ditches are not going to go away. In fact, the Happy Valley plan actually says that they need to stay. So what we would be doing is taking advantage of the school rebuilding the sidewalk in front of the school on 24th Street. What there isn't right now is any kind of crossing improvements at 24th and Mill, and it's an offset intersection.
Yeah.
And so what we would be doing is basically putting in probably a crossing going across Mill and then another one across 24th to get kids over to that new section of sidewalk and right to the school entrance.
well, I think I'm going to slightly differ with my constituents in Happy Valley. Old-fashioned ditches aren't the same thing as a new bioswale. Old-fashioned ditches get clogged and stop functioning. I don't know. It seems to me that there might be an opportunity to actually engineer those as true modern stormwater bioswales, which would be, I think, amended with more drainage material and maybe a little bit shallower. But that doesn't affect this project.
But as somebody who sat through those Happy Valley meetings, Michael, go talk to them, because
I will.
before I'm going to vote for them, I sat through all those meetings, Gene sat through them, and they were very adamant about they liked that quality.
Might end up at one.
Those are contentious.
Well, in the school, as they design when they get into design of the school and their frontage, they'll have to look at any stormwater improvements that would be required, and it's an opportunity to look at that, but guidance from the neighborhood plan as well as the BMC would be appropriate there.
So are we looking for approval of the work plan? Is that,
We are.
Yeah.
Jack?
I want to, I guess, make some observations and maybe some questions about the Sussex Barclay, future study needed project. I heard a little bit of the backstory about why the Transportation Commission was wanting to do that, but I'm a little concerned about exactly how this is all coming about. I'm looking at a map right now, or an overhead, and it shows about maybe 32 houses being served by a crossing across Barclay. And I look at some of our other projects that we have for future study needed or other projects, period, that seem like they're addressing a substantial more than 32 homes as far as the benefit of it. And I'm a little concerned that we would be putting money into a study like that, servicing not very many homes in an area. I mean, a lot of what we were doing as far as the pedestrian master plan criteria had to do about, low-income, servicing low-income people. And this obviously is not in a low-income neighborhood. It's not very many people. It's not really connecting to a commercial district. It's not connecting really to, well, it potentially could connect to trails. But I'm just a little concerned about putting something like that on there when we are having other needs as well.
Yeah, and that was a Tier 3 project identified in both the pedestrian master plan and the bicycle master plan as a Tier 3, and was brought to us by the neighborhood or residents along Sussex. And one of the things that they did point out was, I think, your last point of the trail connections, and that was one of the reasons why I think, in addition to just general concerns about safety, that the Transportation Commission wanted us to look at it. I'm not exactly sure what the result of the study will be. I think there's some issues there that may make it challenging to put a crossing in, just from a sight distance and where the intersection is at. But we need to look at it. At least that's the recommendation from the TC. It's certainly up to the board. It was something that was added during our discussions with the Transportation Commission and was generated by concerns from the neighborhood.
Yeah, I guess the way I saw it, it's just going to be another $100,000 crosswalk that we'd be putting in an area that would service that many homes. It's a lot of money, and in a lot of ways it should have been paid for by the developer at the time that the development, because it's a recent development. If they would have anticipated the fact that there would be crossing concerns across Barclay. And it gets into the situation of looking at the criteria of the master plan, the pedestrian master plan, and really analyzing it to see whether or not all of those things are presented in the most accurate way when you're establishing, the values towards the criteria itself. And I guess maybe the question is that in the pedestrian master plan, it calls for reviews. I don't think it really specifies exactly what the timing is for the reviews, but
Yeah.
Is there an idea or plan to go and have a review of the projects that are on there to make sure that the criteria were applied correctly?
Yeah, you're right. The plans do say that the criteria should be reviewed periodically as things change, circumstances change, to make sure that it's still reflecting what the community would like to see. In terms of the frequency of that, we haven't come up with a formal strategy on how we're going to go back and look at those. I mean, the plans are very new, but it's something we do need to look at as staff. I think it's probably a bit of a continual review of it as things come up, but at some point going forward and actually bring in to council some recommendation for updating the plan. We don't have that laid out at this point, but something we'll be looking at. Maybe one last point on the Sussex-Barclay intersection, and you're right, Sussex is a no outlet, and Brandywine to the other side is a no outlet, but you do have a fair number of folks on the hill that you have a crossing up at Chandler, but you also, it's a fair ways away, and so you are taking, as development occurs there, adding another crossing for not just the folks on those no outlet streets, but people using Barclay. And it's quite a ways between those crossings is the only other thing I would say, from Chandler down to Sussex, and then from Sussex all the way to the next crossing would be near the urban center there, commercial center.
Okay. Michael?
I guess I'm just looking at the map of that intersection. These should be crossings across Barclay.
Yes.
I guess I'm surprised that, there's about 60 houses to the south and about 20 houses to the north. I wouldn't think there'd be that many people wanting to cross from Sussex to Brandywine, you know?
Yeah, I don't have any numbers on the frequency, you know, the demand there. I mean, again, it was a tier 3 identified throughout the
Right,
public
it's a really
process.
unsafe intersection, but I kind of to Jack's point, it didn't seem like it would have a great benefit. I mean, it's a big, wide road at that point. It wouldn't be safe to cross. It's just a matter of priority. I don't have a problem with going forward as to be studied, but I'd be surprised if it ranks, as Jack says, if it ranks any higher than tier 3, even after a review.
Okay. Jack?
I'll move the work plan with one stipulation that the Sussex Barclay Future Study Needed project would be considered to be done after the Lakeway and Holly future study. I mean, we have $40,000 budgeted for it. Let's do the Lakeway first, the Holly second, and the Sussex one third.
Just a quick point of clarification. Holly is actually ongoing right now, and this money for 2015 would be used for Holly. Not all of it, but Holly is, right now, we're working on it.
Okay. But
That
in
is-
terms of the priority, to use that money towards those two projects first before doing the Sussex one.
Is that a problem with?
No, Holly is definitely the priority. We just a little bit more quickly about Holly. Holly is scheduled for resurfacing, and we've delayed that until we understand what needs to be done from a bicycle perspective. And so that is an active project, looking at not just the corridor from a resurfacing and channelization, but also all the intersection improvements. So that is the priority. And what I'm hearing Jack's motion would be, we would then look at Lakeway and then Sussex.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and second before us. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, please answer aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes 6-0 with Kathy Lehman absent. So I think then we've got, the next up is we got two sets of minutes. The first is for 3/24/14. It's up for approval. Yeah. Okay.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of the approval of the meeting minutes, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, so we, minutes are approved 4-0-2 abstention. Abstaining because it wasn't there. The next is a set of meetings for the 10th of November.
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion before us. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Aye. So most minutes are approved 5-0-1 with Kathy Lehman absent. Jack?
In looking at this plan that Chris was putting together here, or that has presented, and also knowing all of these other projects that are on both the master plans, the ped and bike plan, I'm a little concerned about us noticing specific property owners that might be part of a tier 1 or tier 2 type of project that might come up in the near future. I noticed last week that there's a sidewalk improvement that's right around the corner from where I live that's supposed to happen, and it's rated as a tier 1 project, and it should be happening relatively soon, at least within the next few years. And residents, I don't think, knew about it, and they ended up planting 3 really nice trees right in the right of way of the sidewalk. And I don't think that they're going to be very happy when they understand that their trees are going to have to be removed in order to get the sidewalk in. And I'm wondering whether or not we can, I know it's an extra workload type of thing, but whether or not there's a way of being able to notice people so that we can minimize future conflicts.
Yeah, we typically, as you know, don't do the notice until it's a project that's approved and we start working on it and start engaging the adjacent property owners, like Chris mentioned, what's going on now on Ohio Street. So to notify prior to that, even, like say it's a tier 1 and we anticipate it's going to be built in the next 6 years or so, we'd have to think about that a little bit on how we would do that and what that would mean. Given that we don't have any dates, we don't know for certain that it would be built. But I can appreciate what you're saying, and people often do improve the right-of-way, and you would hate for them to put in significant expense only to have it pulled out. So if we can think about that a little bit maybe and think about our outreach, we're always looking at ways to do that better. So we'll talk about maybe that process a little bit and get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Seeing nothing, we are adjourned.
Thank you.